This unicorn is horny. Putting the brain just right. Hi, Jesse! You're back! Almost finished!
Sister, I brought... What the fuck?
There's something that happens at tables sometimes when a player asks you a completely reasonable question and it absolutely destroys you. It wasn't rude or anything, it was actually logical.
Where's the money, Lebowski?
We're mid-session, and we just cleared a dungeon. The loot had been handed out, everyone was happy. I'm about to describe the road ahead, and one of my players, who is a good player, they've been at my table for 2 years. They just look up at me and say, "So what do we get for going to the village?" And it just made me stop for a second. It wasn't like he was being lazy or difficult. He was literally just doing what I'd spent the last 6 months training him to do, without even realizing it. He needed a GM confirmed reward, an official sanctioned reason to go somewhere, and if the reason didn't exist, neither did the destination. You've probably seen something similar to this at your table. Maybe you've been frustrated by it, and maybe you blamed your players, because I did for about 30 seconds, and it partially is their fault, but it's also on me. So this is going to be a similar video to the situations one, as I feel like a lot of people resonated with it. Anyways, as I was saying, it wasn't always like that. Early on in our campaign, I'd built an underground section that had tunnels and chambers and corridors. All the standard stuff. Some of the rooms were genuinely empty. They weren't a mysterious empty or a secret significant empty, just like a fill-up room. I needed the map to feel like a real place, so I just padded out chambers that had nothing in them. The party walked into one, and there was a copper coin on the floor. I didn't even remember putting it in there. I'd probably just accidentally put it on the map when I was making it. But the players, being players, decided it was bait. This had to have been placed deliberately by someone who wanted them to think the room was empty, which meant that the room wasn't empty, which meant they needed to find what was actually there. And what followed was hours of them pouring out whatever liquid they had on the floor and the walls to see if there was any cracks or seams, and checking for hidden compartments. I'm pretty certain at one point they started setting the room on fire, and when that didn't work, they started smashing the floor up to see if there was anything underneath, hidden. I even showed them my notes that the room was actually empty, like, have a look, room's empty, and they had a quick discussion and then they scuttled off and did it again in the next room, setting the place on fire and smashing the floor up, casting detect magic and getting on hands and knees and looking around in every crevice. And they were pretty confident they were going to find it this time, and like I said, there was never anything. But that told me that when the players trusted that the world might be hiding something, they didn't need me to confirm it. They'd invent the mystery themselves and chase it with everything they had. And somewhere between that session and the village question, I'd killed that somehow. And now I'm going to incriminate myself a little bit, but nothing I did was malicious. It was all reasonable. I think it was like month 3 of the campaign, I decided to get better at GMing. Specifically, I decided that better meant more efficient, so I started optimizing things. I added clearer quest structures and main objectives and trackers, so I always knew which thread was the primary one and which was side content. I even started pre-flagging rewards, like this path leads to a dungeon which has the thing you need, because I didn't want the players to feel like they'd wasted a session going the wrong direction. I tightened the pacing and I stopped letting scenes breathe more, moving things along when momentum dipped, and it did look like progress. The sessions seemed a lot cleaner, players seemed less confused, and I was hitting the beats, landing the moments, and combat seemed tighter. But what I didn't see was every time the players went off script, I didn't have anything there. It was like a dead end, and every time they followed an official hook, something was waiting, and I was quietly building a system where official equals rewarding and unofficial meant empty. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't teaching them to explore, it was actually the opposite. I was telling them not to bother, and they did seem happy. Nobody complained, everyone turned up every time. But I'd built a theme park with clear marked paths and visible rewards. No reason to wander off the track. You'd probably done a version of this, I think everyone has. You think you're respecting your players' time and you're getting more done and experiencing less. Then if we go to session 20 something, it was the end of the dungeon, players were looting the final room, and I described the door to the side. It had old stonework and clearly different from the rest of the construction. Obviously not part of the original dungeon, you know? And nobody moved. I could see them all looking on the map at the door. They looked at each other, pointing at the door on the map, waited about 15 seconds in silence, then, is that door part of the quest? And I said it's not, it's just a door, and then they left. A mysterious, clearly significant an architectural anomalous door that didn't belong in the dungeon, and they left it because I told them it didn't count. That night, I closed my laptop lid and I sat there for a bit, counting the other doors they'd left closed. I'd started to see a pattern that I couldn't unsee. They weren't investigating things I'd mentioned in passing anymore. They weren't following rumors or revisiting old locations or asking what's over there about anything without an objective attached. Every session, they were just waiting for me to tell them what mattered, and there's going to be people in the comments that say, that's a player problem, but they weren't wrong to wait. I'd spent 6 months training them to wait. When I went off script, it meant empty, and official meant rewarding. I had built that system consistently without realizing I was building anything at all. I trained them the same way a bad game designer trains players. It wasn't through intent, but through what I rewarded and what I let die. They basically learned that risk didn't pay off, and that direction always came with confirmation, and that rewards meant something mattered, and no reward meant it didn't. By the time I'd understood what I'd done, they had quietly replaced curiosity with efficiency. And what makes it worse is they were actually having fun, and nobody was complaining. The campaign was moving forward, so it just looked fine. But the world wasn't living anymore. It was just a well-organized series of content deliveries, tight, reliable, and safe. Think about your own table for a second. Do your players investigate things you mention in passing? Do they go somewhere just because they're curious, or do they wait for a hook, a marker or reward they can see coming? Because if they're waiting, that's something you've built. And I know it's uncomfortable to say it was me, but it's also good news, because if you've built it, you can change it. I'd optimized the wonder out of my campaign and my players to stop looking at it. The hidden lesson here for me is that players don't explore, they respond to everything you do, like your structure and your pacing and your language, even rewards. They're reading all that constantly. They're reverse engineering what you actually think matters, and then they're doing more of that. It's not a personality thing or a player problem, it's just how people work in collaborative spaces. We read signals and follow patterns and figure out the unspoken rules without being told. And the signal you send when you label main quests and confirm rewards, and use your official hooks with content and then leave the unofficial exploration empty is basically wait for me, I'll tell you what's worth your time. You don't get exploratory players by asking for exploration or by adding exploration mechanics, or even by telling your players to be more curious. It's from building a table where curiosity is the rational choice. If players aren't exploring, then the environment is wrong, not them. So what can you actually do about it? Well, first you can stop labeling content. No more main quest language at the table. Stuff like this is a side thing if you're interested. Pull the hierarchy out of how you describe the world and just describe it. A haunted mill isn't a side quest, it's just a haunted mill. What your players do with it is their business. Second, you can stop pre-confirming rewards. I know why we do it. I did it out of kindness. I didn't want players to feel like they'd wasted a session or missed something. But the moment you tell them something's valuable, they're not exploring anymore. They're just going shopping. Take the confirmation away and let the discovery be the discovery. And third, if you have any kind of main side quest tracking system in your notes, archive it. If you don't know which thread is the primary one, you can't accidentally telegraph it. I deleted mine and immediately felt the difference in how I describe things. It'll be initial confusion at your table, maybe a bit of frustration. You might even get a player saying, is this campaign going off the rails? But give it 2 sessions before you judge it. The confusion is just the sound of the players remembering they're allowed to wander. Honestly, a couple of sessions after I made those changes, things were different. A standard travel scene with a 5-minute transition, some set dressing, and nothing significant. I mentioned an old way station at the side of the road. Abandoned, ivy on the walls, the roof caved in on one side. One of my players said, can we check it out? I didn't flag it or anything. They were just curious. There was literally nothing inside. An old hearthstone, rotted furniture, a bit of graffiti carved in the walls by travelers who passed by 30 years ago. They spent a good 20 minutes there reading the graffiti and inventing stories about who'd written it. One of my players decided her character had been through this way station as a kid and couldn't explain why she remembered it. I didn't even put it there. She'd made it out of something that I described for texture. It made the table energy shift in a way I felt immediately, and people started looking at the map differently. They started asking about a town they'd passed through in session 2 and whether it was worth going back. That's the great thing about exploratory players. You don't have to manufacture investment. They literally just bring it. You have to stop accidentally telling them the world isn't worth looking at. All I've done is stop telling them the way station didn't matter, and they did the rest. Now, okay, but players still need to feel like exploring does something. If you strip out the confirmed rewards, what's left? It's common misconception that rewards mean loot or XP, because it doesn't. The best reward is actually information that changes how you see something, making it feel like the world was there before your players got there. A detail that reframes something they thought they already understood understood. When my players went into that way station, the reward was the graffiti. It wasn't significant, but it gave them permission to make it significant. The world felt real enough to have history, and that's valuable. What I give the players now when they explore isn't loot most of the time, it's consequences. Things that change because they were there or didn't change because they weren't. It's context, history, and texture that reframes what they already know. Character moments that connect unexpectedly to a backstory, like a surprise, the world doing something they didn't see coming. None of that required extra prep or loot tables, just a world that feels like it's running whether your players show up or not. And the key is when your players believe it, they actually feel like the world is real, and they'll explore it instinctively. You didn't have to tell them that there was a reward at the end, they just wanted to know what was actually there. Exploration isn't a mechanic you can add into a game. There's no system or table or reward track that creates it. Exploration is behaviour. Sometimes players do it when the conditions are right, and the conditions aren't more content, they're not better hooks or random encounter tables. It's trust, that the world is actually real, and not every answer is going to be handed to them. You can build a table where exploring is the natural, logical, obvious thing to do. If your players aren't doing it, it's not a broken situation, the environment is, which means you can fix it, and you can build it, and you can change it. You don't even have to blow up the campaign to do it. Anyway, the first couple sessions after I made these changes felt weird. Players who had gotten used to the structure were confused by the absence of it. One of them asked if it was okay, like maybe I'd lost my notes and was winging it or something. In a way, I was winging it back towards something I'd abandoned without meaning to. I'm a better GM now. That was years ago. My prep is tighter, my NPCs are better, and I've got stronger pacing. I just had to unlearn that part where I'd taken those improvements and used them to quietly strangle the thing I was trying to improve, if that makes any sense. So let me know if you struggled with something similar in your campaigns, or if you're a player and you feel like your GM is doing this. Let us know. Maybe someone's got advice they can give you, or share this video with them so they can see it as well. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy, adventurers.